My name is Martha Green. I'm 82 years old. I've lived long enough to know that monsters don't just live under your bed or hide in fairy tales. Sometimes they grow in your womb, wear your last name, and wait until your bones are fragile enough to snap under their ambition. My story isn't just one of survival. It's about betrayal wrapped in a smile, and a son who looked me in the eye and told me he loved me, while planning to murder me for the money I never even told him I had. The morning it happened, the sun was shining too brightly for the darkness that was about to unfold. We were standing at the platform of Riverside train station. My son, Gregory, insisted on taking me out for a day of fresh air. He held my arm so gently, speaking softly, almost lovingly. But I had seen the text he accidentally sent to me the night before, the one meant for someone else. It's tomorrow. Once she's gone, the inheritance clears. Meet me at the bank at 4. I didn't confront him. Not then. Played along. Wore my Sunday dress, and even let him pack my lunch. But inside me, a storm was brewing. Had to know for sure. I had to see how far my own son was willing to go. That's why I agreed to the walk near the train tracks. He kept checking his watch nervously. He didn't think I noticed. But I watched every twitch of his fingers. Every time he looked around. Every time he tensed as the train announcements echoed through the station. The platform wasn't busy. He waited until the moment was quiet. Then he said, "Ma, look at that old rail sign. Remember when you used to take me to see the trains?" He nodded. He moved behind me. "Go a little closer. You'll see the sign better." And then he pressed his hand against the middle of my back. Hard. The world slowed down. But so did I. Because I had braced for it. I didn't fall. Instead, I turned around so fast his balance shifted. He staggered. And that's when the train screamed past behind me. Just inches away. I caught him by the collar, and for a moment, the fear in his eyes told me everything. He didn't just trip. He knew what I knew. He knew that I knew. But I didn't push him. "Not yet," I whispered. "I read your text, Gregory." His jaw clenched. "Now," I said, stepping back with a smirk, "shall we talk about how you plan to kill your mother in broad daylight?" But what he said next made my blood run colder than that passing wind. Because it wasn't regret. It wasn't denial. It was, "You weren't supposed to see that. But I have a backup plan." And right there he pulled out his phone. But before he could dial, I stepped forward and knocked it right out of his hand. The phone shattered on the platform. He looked at me, face pale, eyes wide. But behind me, footsteps echoed. Someone else was watching us. And they weren't supposed to be there. Someone I didn't expect to see. Someone who had a camera. And now I had to figure out if they were friend or foe. Because what Gregory didn't know yet was that I also had a plan. Let me take you back, before the train, before the betrayal, before the text, to when I thought I had raised a good man. But how do you know, truly, what grows in the heart of your own blood? It started years before the station. Back when I first opened the account Gregory would kill to own. Please like, comment, and subscribe if this story gave you chills. Next chapter is where the real secrets begin to unravel. Gregory wasn't always like this. Or maybe he was. And I just didn't see it through the haze of love only a mother could offer. When he was a boy, he used to pick me wildflowers and bring them to my bedside every Mother's Day. I used to hold him close at night and pray for his future, that he'd grow up kind, wise, and strong. But perhaps prayers only work when the person receiving them has a soul left to hear. I was a seamstress most of my life. I didn't make much, but I saved every dime I could. After my husband, Harold, died in his sleep 15 years ago, the little life we built together felt like it would shatter. But I stayed in that house. I stayed strong. I didn't need much. Just my morning cup of tea and the sound of birds outside my window. What I had I kept private. Including the savings account Harold and I had opened just 2 months before his passing. Gregory never knew about it. At least I thought he didn't. It started to change around the time he lost his job. First he came around more often. Always helping out. Fixing loose tiles, replacing broken porch steps. Felt nice, like we were bonding again. But then the questions started. Subtle ones. Mom, how much does Social Security pay you, really? Do you ever think about, making a will? Do you keep cash in the house? Some seniors do, and it's dangerous. I laughed it off at the time. I even felt flattered he cared so much. But the visits became less about me and more about what I had. He'd open drawers when he thought I wasn't looking. Ask to help me pay bills, only to scan them too closely. He even once asked for the password to my computer, claiming he wanted to install updates for me. I should have known then. But mothers, we always want to believe in our children, even when they give us every reason not to. One afternoon, I was in the backyard garden when I heard his voice inside my house. I wasn't expecting him. My blood ran cold. I tiptoed up to the back door and peeked through the window. Gregory was on my landline phone, my old corded one in the hallway. I watched his lips move. No, she's still kicking. But the house is worth at least $600K. And there's a separate account, I'm sure. I've seen mail from Fidelity. I just have to get her out of the picture. Once that happens, I can liquidate everything. I don't remember dropping the watering can. But I did. It crashed on the concrete and echoed like thunder. His eyes flew wide as he turned. Ma, you're back already. I didn't say a word. I just turned around and walked back to the garden. My hands trembled. My knees shook. But I couldn't let him see me fall apart. From that moment, I knew I had to move in silence. I called my friend Dorothy the next day. She's a retired legal secretary who'd helped me write up a basic will years ago. I asked if she'd help me change it, and if she knew someone who could install cameras. Dorothy didn't ask questions. She just came over with her walking cane, her notepad, and a young man named Curtis, her nephew, who worked in security systems. By the end of the week, there were 5 hidden cameras in my house. One in the kitchen, one in the living room, one in my bedroom, one at the back entrance, and one near the hallway where Gregory had made his call. I pretended to be weak, slower, more forgetful. I even left bank statements lying out, fake ones, printed with forged balances that would make any greedy man foam at the mouth. Gregory bit the bait. He began visiting every day, cooking for me, cleaning, bringing me flowers again. Then one afternoon he brought up the train. Ma, he said softly, how about we take a trip soon? Get you out of the house. Clear your head. Smiled. That sounds lovely. He leaned in, kissed my forehead. Just the two of us, he whispered. But I knew better. And I wasn't going to let my own son write the last chapter of my life. So I started writing my own. Called Curtis again. Asked him if he could help me set up something else, something portable. He handed me a tiny recording device, one I could wear like a brooch. It looked like a flower pin. Perfectly harmless. That was the brooch I wore the day Gregory tried to push me in front of that train. That same day, I'd forwarded Curtis everything from the home cameras. The call Gregory made. The forged signature attempts on my documents. His attempts to log into my accounts. All of it. What Gregory didn't realize was that he wasn't the only one recording something that day. And when I turned around on that train platform, after he tried to shove me, I saw Curtis across the platform, filming, just as I had asked. But as Gregory picked up the shattered pieces of his phone, he muttered something that sent a chill down my spine. This isn't over, Mom. I narrowed my eyes. I didn't raise you to be a criminal, Gregory. He laughed. No, you raised me to survive. And I'm just doing what I have to do. Then he turned and walked off, calmly, like nothing had happened. Curtis rushed over to me. You okay, Miss Martha? He nodded. Barely. Did you get it all? Every frame. But then Curtis looked toward the stairwell leading off the platform. His eyes widened. Who is that? He asked. Turned to look. A tall man in a black coat stood at the edge of the stairs. He wasn't moving. And he wasn't watching the trains. He was watching me. I didn't recognize him. But when he turned and walked away, I caught a glimpse of something shiny in his hand. A silver ring. The same one Gregory's lawyer wore when I met him briefly years ago. Was Gregory not working alone? And if not, how many people knew about my fortune? Please like, comment, and subscribe if this story kept you guessing. Next chapter will take you deeper into the lies and alliances I didn't see coming. The silver ring glinted under the platform lights before the man disappeared down the stairs. My breath caught in my throat. That wasn't just any ring. It had an odd triangular crest etched on it, something I remembered clearly from the day Gregory brought a man named Mr. Fletcher into my living room. "This is just for consultation," Gregory had said with a smile. "Mr. Fletcher helps families prepare for the future." Back then I didn't ask many questions. I trusted Gregory foolishly. Fletcher hadn't said much. Just nodded a lot and slid a folder toward me. Documents with complicated language and blank signature lines. I didn't sign anything. But now I realized that short meeting was just the beginning. Curtis and I returned to my home in silence. The air between us was heavy. When we reached the porch, I sank into the wooden rocking chair Harold built for me when we first bought this house. It creaked under my weight, but it was the only place I felt safe. Curtis sat across from me. "You think he hired someone?" he asked. "I don't know," I whispered. "But that man, he wasn't there by accident." Curtis leaned forward. "We can go to the police. You have footage now. You have evidence. Attempted murder isn't something they can ignore." But I wasn't ready, not yet. "Not until I know the full truth," I said. "Because here's the thing about betrayal. Once it begins, you start questioning everything and everyone." I had to make sure there weren't more names on Gregory's list. I had to make sure my house, my bank accounts, my life weren't all pawns in a bigger game. And to do that, I needed to act like nothing had changed. So I cooked Gregory his favorite stew the next evening, left the porch light on, called him and said, "I missed you. Come over." And he did. He came smiling, arms full of groceries, voice sweet like honey, but his eyes darted to the corners of the room like he was still calculating something, still searching for his next move. Over dinner, he made another suggestion. "I think you should add me to the deed, Ma," he said, scooping rice onto his plate. "You know, just to protect things in case something happens." Smiled. "Of course, darling. We'll go see someone this week." His fork froze midair. "Really? Really?" I lied. But that night, I stayed up and began writing letters. To the bank. To my lawyer. To the notary. I told them all the same thing. No changes were to be made to any documents without me present and recorded on video, speaking clearly and willingly. I had Curtis notarize my statement and deliver copies himself. Because if Gregory wanted to play dirty, I was going to fight clean but smart. 2 days later, something even more alarming happened. I was watering my front rosebush when a woman approached my gate. She looked to be in her late 40s, dressed in expensive heels, hair perfectly straightened. She held a briefcase. "Mrs. Green," she called. "Yes," I asked, clutching my hose tighter. "I'm Vanessa Fletcher. You don't know me, but I'm Mr. Fletcher's wife. I thought you should see this." She pulled out a manila folder and slid it through the gate. Inside were 6 pages. I scanned the top of the first. Durable power of attorney. Full rights. My name was on the document. Gregory's was signed below. But the date said 3 months ago. My knees buckled. "He forged it," Vanessa whispered. "My husband was supposed to stop doing this. He's been forging documents for years with rich, elderly clients. Gregory hired him after they met at a poker game. But Gregory took it further. He's unhinged." My hands trembled. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I found out they tried the same thing on my uncle before he passed. My husband's a fraud, and I've filed for divorce." She looked around nervously. "But Gregory knows you didn't die at the station. So he's getting desperate." I lowered my voice. "What's he planning next?" She hesitated, then said, "I think he wants to poison you." I felt the world tilt. "Check your food," she said urgently. "Your drinks. Everything." And with that, she walked away, heels clicking on the pavement like gunshots. I stood frozen, clutching the forged papers, the wind suddenly colder against my neck. Curtis and I scoured my pantry that night. We checked every bottle, every box. And sure enough, in a bottle of elderberry tonic Gregory had brought last week, Curtis found something strange. The seal had been broken, the cap replaced. Curtis took it to his lab friend at the college. And the next day he called me. "There's arsenic in it, Miss Martha. Small dose. Not enough to kill instantly, but enough to weaken you, confuse you, make you fall. Possibly even make it look like natural decline." My hands clenched into fists. Gregory hadn't just tried to push me onto the tracks. He was trying to push me out of life altogether. Slowly, quietly, cruelly. I went to the sheriff the next morning. Showed them the footage. The bottle. The forged documents. The statement from Vanessa. Sheriff Davies, a man I'd known since he was a boy, leaned back in his chair and looked at me with sorrow. "We're gonna build this case, Miss Martha. But we have to be careful. Gregory's covering his tracks. We need more. One false move and he'll disappear." He nodded. "Then let's make sure he thinks he's already won," I said coldly. Because if Gregory wanted me dead, I was going to make sure the world saw him for what he truly was. But then, that same night my house alarm went off. Curtis wasn't with me. I grabbed my flashlight and crept down the stairs. And there on my living room floor was a single item. Shovel. And next to it, a note in Gregory's handwriting. "If you won't go quietly, I'll bury you myself." Please like, comment, and subscribe if this chapter sent chills down your spine. Next chapter is where things take a darker, more dangerous turn, and the trap for Gregory begins. I stared at that shovel like it was an open casket, an omen, not just a message. My son had crossed a line he could never uncross. There was no more pretending. No more hoping he'd come to his senses. Gregory had declared war. Not just on my life but on the very idea of love between a mother and her child. The note still sat next to the shovel, written in sharp, angry strokes. "If you won't go quietly, I'll bury you myself." I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I picked up that note with gloved fingers and slid it into a Ziploc bag. Then I dragged the shovel to the hallway closet and locked it inside. Curtis arrived less than 15 minutes later, still panting from the sprint across town. He'd been staying with friends close by just in case anything happened, and I had only just set the alarm again when he pounded on the door. He looked at me and didn't need to ask. My eyes told him everything. We sat in the kitchen in silence. Then I said it out loud for the first time. "He's trying to break me." Curtis nodded slowly. "Then we break him first." I knew we had to move fast. The law was slow. Gregory was reckless. And I couldn't wait for a courtroom to decide if my life was worth saving. So I planned something I never thought I'd plan in my lifetime. A sting operation. I called Gregory the next morning, voice warm, shaking slightly for effect. "I'm tired, Greg," I said. "You were right. About everything. Let's meet. I want to talk about transferring the deed. Let's just do it." He was quiet for a beat. Then his voice dropped an octave. "Really?" "Yes," I said. "I don't want to fight anymore." He exhaled like he'd won. And I let him think he had. We agreed to meet that Friday at the lawyer's office, the same place he brought that crooked Mr. Fletcher. But what he didn't know was that I'd already changed lawyers. My new attorney, Ms. Lucille Banks, was a sharp, gray-haired woman who had no tolerance for fools. And more importantly, she had connections with the district attorney's office. The plan was simple. I'd get Gregory to confess. On camera. With a wire. In a controlled environment. I'd bait the greed right out of him. And let the law do the rest. The days leading up to Friday were the longest of my life. I slept with one eye open. I locked every window. Curtis practically camped on my front porch, armed with a baseball bat and a GoPro. But Gregory didn't show up again. No more calls. No visits. Just silence. It was the quiet before the storm. Friday came. I wore my nicest blouse, fixed my hair the way Harold used to like it, and pinned the hidden mic inside my lapel. Curtis dropped me off 2 blocks away from the law office to keep things discreet. I walked the rest of the way alone, heart pounding so hard I thought it might short-circuit the microphone. Gregory was already inside when I arrived. Dressed in a charcoal suit, hair slicked back, a smug grin stretched across his face. "Mom," he said, standing to kiss my cheek. "You look radiant." I wanted to slap the teeth from his mouth, but I smiled. "Let's get this over with," I whispered. Ms. Banks greeted us and led us into a small conference room. A camera was hidden in a clock on the wall. 2 secret microphones sat in the flower vase. And the recorder on me was already live. We started with the basics. She asked Gregory to state his name, our relationship, and why we were there. He did, all with perfect politeness. Then came my part. "I'm here to sign over my estate," I said slowly, eyes locked on him. "Because my son told me I don't need it anymore." Ms. Banks looked at him. "Is that true, Mr. Green?" Gregory leaned back. "Look, she's getting older. She's confused a lot. Sometimes she forgets things. This is for her own protection." I smiled sweetly. "Tell them what you told me, Gregory." He tilted his head. "Which part?" "The part where you said I was worth more dead than alive." His jaw clenched. "I don't remember saying that." "Do you remember trying to push me in front of a train?" "Yes." The room fell silent. "I stumbled," he said, grinning like a cornered rat. "She's exaggerating." "What about the arsenic?" "Yes." "The tonic you brought me. Lab tests confirmed it." "I have no idea what you're talking about," he said, eyes darting to the exit. That's when Ms. Banks leaned forward and said, "Well, you might want to explain it to the detectives outside." Gregory froze. 2 officers entered the room. One showed a badge. The other had handcuffs. But just as they stepped forward, Gregory flipped the table. He lunged for me. Curtis burst in from the hallway and tackled him before he could reach me. Papers flew. Screams echoed. It was chaos. When the dust settled, Gregory lay in cuffs, face bruised, screaming that I had set him up. "I'm your son. I deserve everything. You owe me." But I just looked at him, voice low and calm. "I owe you nothing, Gregory. You tried to kill your own mother." He snarled. "You'll regret this, you old witch." The officers dragged him out of the room. Curtis helped me to my feet, hands trembling. Ms. Banks nodded silently, eyes fierce. But as I stood there, heart racing, I knew it wasn't over. Because while Gregory was being led away, my phone buzzed. One new message. It was from an unknown number. "You stopped Gregory. But I'm still watching. F." I nearly dropped the phone. "Who is F?" Curtis asked. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I think there's someone else pulling strings." And just like that, my son wasn't the only monster in the shadows. Please like, comment, and subscribe if this chapter kept your heart racing. Next chapter is where we uncover the web Gregory was part of, and the new enemy lurking in the dark. The message haunted me long after Gregory was dragged away in cuffs. It wasn't the words that scared me, it was the signature. F. I stared at it, rereading the text over and over. The tone was cold, calculated. Didn't sound like someone bluffing. It sounded like someone involved. Someone who had been watching from the start. Curtis looked over my shoulder, his brows furrowed. "You think that's Mr. Fletcher?" I didn't answer right away. My fingers trembled as I locked the phone screen and placed it gently on the table like it might explode. "It has to be," I whispered. "Or someone tied to him." Curtis reached for the landline on the kitchen wall. "We need to tell the sheriff. Now." But I stopped him. "No," I said. "We go to Vanessa first. She knows more about her husband's operations than anyone. She might know who else is circling." We drove to her condo downtown that same evening. Vanessa answered the door wearing a long robe, hair tied back, but her eyes were sharp, like she hadn't rested since the day she delivered that folder to me. When I showed her the message, her lips went pale. "That's not Fletcher," she said after a long pause. "He wouldn't be that bold. He's too careful." "Then who is it?" I asked. She took a deep breath and sat on the edge of her couch. "There's someone else. Someone Fletcher used to work with before they split. He goes by Franklin. No last name. That's how he protects himself." "And what does this Franklin do exactly?" "He takes what Fletcher starts and finishes it, with no witnesses," she said grimly. My chest tightened. "And now he thinks I'm the loose end." Vanessa nodded slowly. "You humiliated Gregory. You exposed Fletcher's forgery. Franklin sees that as risk." "He doesn't like risk." Curtis stepped forward. "Can you find him? Track his number?" Vanessa's eyes flicked to a closed cabinet behind her. Then she stood and opened it. Inside was a laptop, a USB drive, and several leather-bound folders. I kept backups. Fletcher didn't know. Phone numbers. Payment receipts. If Franklin reached out to Gregory or Fletcher, he'll be in here. She handed the USB drive to Curtis. "He's likely watching now," she added. "He'll think you've relaxed. That you've lowered your guard." Understood. "Then let's make him believe exactly that." Curtis and I left, drove back to my house, and locked every door behind us. He spent the next few hours going through the contents of the USB. Bank logs. Shadow clients. But then he paused. "Miss Martha, I think I found something." He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a transaction from 3 weeks prior. A wire transfer of $30,000. From Gregory's personal checking account to an unregistered account labeled simply F. Real Estate Solutions. I stared at it. "That's a payout." Curtis nodded. "A down payment for something big." "But what?" We didn't have to wait long to find out. The very next morning a letter arrived in my mailbox. No stamp. No return address. Just a single sheet inside with bold letters. "Leave town. Sell the house. No police. Or next time we don't miss." Below that was a printed photo of me and Curtis at the grocery store the day before. Someone had been tailing us, watching me. And if they had my address, my routines, my face in photos, they weren't bluffing. Sheriff Davies called me in just hours later. "Gregory made bail," he said grimly. "Anonymous sponsor. Paid in full. Cash." My stomach dropped. "Let me guess," I muttered. "His name starts with F." "We're tracking it," he replied. "But you need to be careful. Gregory's record buys us some leverage, but if he stays out of trouble, we can't rearrest him until trial." "He won't stay out of trouble," I said coldly. "He doesn't know how." Sure enough, that night I saw it with my own eyes. Through the front curtain, I spotted a car parked across from my house. Engine running. Headlights off. A man leaned out the window, taking photos. Curtis wanted to call the police, but I stopped him. "I want them to think I'm still helpless," I said. So we set a trap. That weekend I faked a fall on my porch. Gregory had always wanted me looking frail. I made sure neighbors saw me being helped into the house. Curtis made a show of bringing walkers, new prescriptions, anything to make me look weak and dependent. And then we let the news leak, through a planted phone call, overheard at a local diner, that I was signing over my house to Gregory the following Tuesday. Sure enough, the trap worked. That night, Curtis caught someone trying to break into the basement. The security system tripped. The cameras caught everything. The man wore gloves, mask, but the ring gave him away. That same silver ring with the triangular crest. Fletcher. But when the police caught him hiding in my bushes, zip ties and a syringe in his coat, he said one chilling sentence. "You can stop me, but you can't stop him." Gregory, the man I gave life to, he hadn't given up. He had just passed the torch to something far darker. And now the only way to stop the storm was to become one. Please like, comment, and subscribe if this chapter shook you to your core. Next chapter is where I rise. Not just to defend my life, but to expose every rotten root that led my son to this evil. I had never imagined my life would come to this. Police swarming my garden, crime scene tape strung across my rosebushes, and Fletcher being stuffed into the back of a patrol car with a syringe in his coat pocket. I'd grown those roses with Harold, planted them with the same hands that raised Gregory. Now they were trampled by boots and shadowed by betrayal. Curtis and I stood on the porch, watching as officers dusted for prints. But I wasn't trembling anymore. Something inside me had changed. The fear was gone. I was no longer trying to survive. Now I was ready to fight. Sheriff Davies returned from the backyard, holding a clipboard. "We've got enough to charge Fletcher with attempted assault, unlawful surveillance, and conspiracy. But Gregory's still protected legally. He didn't show up, didn't send messages, didn't step foot on your property. Then we make him show his face," I said. Davies raised a brow. "How?" "By giving him exactly what he wants." Curtis turned to me. "Miss Martha, I know what I'm doing," I said. "It's time to play the long game." That night, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen and wrote a letter to Gregory. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter, sealed in an envelope with his name in ink on the front. "Dear Gregory, you win. I'm tired. You always said I didn't trust you enough. Maybe that's true. Come by Tuesday morning and we'll sign everything over. You'll have the house, the accounts, the keys. I'll be gone by sunset. Your mother, Martha." I asked Vanessa to deliver it. He wouldn't suspect her. Not now. And he didn't. Tuesday morning came like the rising of a storm. The sky hung heavy with gray clouds. Curtis stayed hidden in the back room with Sheriff Davies' officers watching live feeds from the kitchen and front room cameras. Made tea. Wore my oldest sweater. Let my hair down so I looked worn. Fragile. Weak. When Gregory arrived, he didn't knock. He walked in. Like he owned the place. He stood in my kitchen doorway, smiling like a man who had finally claimed the throne. "Mom," he said sweetly, "you finally came to your senses." "I suppose I have," I whispered. "Sit. Let's talk before the notary arrives." He walked slowly, admiring the space like a predator surveying his new territory. His eyes stopped on the fireplace, the silverware, the wooden floor he used to crawl on as a boy. "You know," he said, "it really didn't have to be this way." "No," I said. "But you made it this way." His smile faltered. "Let's just get through today," he said. "We don't need to rehash anything." I slid a folder toward him. Inside was a fake property transfer document, identical to the real one but completely powerless. Curtis had made sure of it. Gregory pulled out a pen and looked at me. "Aren't you going to read it?" I asked softly. "I trust you now," he said, grinning. He signed without hesitation. When he finished, he leaned back. "So, where are you going?" "I'm not going anywhere," I replied, standing slowly. His brows knitted. "What?" I said I'm not going anywhere. He chuckled. "You just gave me everything. It's done." "No," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "What's done is you. You're finished, Gregory." He stood quickly. "What is this?" Behind him, the hallway door opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. Curtis followed, holding a small black device in his hand. "You've just been recorded confessing to property theft, coercion and fraud," Curtis said. "That document is invalid. You signed it under false pretenses. And this house is wired." Gregory's eyes darted around the room. "You set me up," he hissed. "No," I said, stepping forward, my hands shaking but my heart solid as stone. "You set this in motion the day you chose greed over your own mother." Gregory lunged. But the officers moved faster. They tackled him to the ground, cuffed him, and read him his rights. He thrashed like a child, screaming, "You're going to die alone, you bitter witch." I stepped closer and knelt beside him. "No, son," I whispered. "You will." They hauled him out. As he was shoved into the patrol car, a news van pulled up. Cameras rolled. Vanessa stood at the curb, waiting. She had called the press herself. Because this wasn't just a crime, it was a warning. To anyone plotting in the shadows. To anyone who thinks old women are easy prey. I walked out to the porch as the rain began to fall. Vanessa joined me. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded. "I'm more than okay. I'm free." But just as I was about to close the door, Curtis called from inside. "Miss Martha, you need to see this." I followed him back into the kitchen. He had the USB open again. But it wasn't Fletcher's records this time. It was something deeper. Ledger. Dozens of entries under a coded account. Each entry followed the same pattern. Elderly client. Property seized. Family connection. Transfer completed. Each one with initials next to it. Jeff. Gregory Green and Franklin Fletcher. But below that, one last entry. Pending. Martha Green. Finalization date. November 12th. Today was November 11th. I sank into the chair, my mind spinning. "He had backup plans on backup plans," I whispered. Curtis turned to me slowly. "This wasn't about just money, Miss Martha. This was part of something bigger. The storm hadn't passed. It had just opened its second chapter. Please like, comment, and subscribe if this chapter gave you chills. Next chapter will peel back the curtain on the criminal network Gregory was part of. And the real mastermind who isn't done with me yet." For a long moment I couldn't breathe. The glow of the laptop screen reflected in my glasses, but all I saw were those words. Pending. Martha Green. Finalization date. November 12th. If I hadn't moved when I did. If Curtis hadn't helped. If Vanessa hadn't spoken up. I might not be sitting here. I might have been found slumped in my garden, or worse. Just vanished altogether. My house sold. My accounts drained. And Gregory. He would have cried at my funeral. Called me a saint. Walked away a millionaire. Curtis leaned in. "Miss Martha, look at this." He pointed at another column in the ledger. It was a coded string, but one I recognized. Till 4188. That was my banking account number. My private one. The one Harold and I had opened decades ago. My hand trembled as I reached for the phone and called the bank's fraud unit. It was past hours, but I had an emergency code flagged from the sheriff's office. The voice on the other end confirmed my fear. "Yes, ma'am. There was an automated request to transfer the full balance, $412,000, into a new holding account under your name. Transfer was scheduled for tomorrow morning. But it was set up remotely. Not from your devices." I swallowed hard. "Can you cancel it?" "Yes," the woman replied. "But if we hadn't flagged your account earlier for protective watch, it would have gone through." That's when it hit me. Even in jail, Gregory had a system. He wasn't acting alone. This was a network. I turned to Vanessa. "How far does this go?" She exhaled deeply and sat beside me. "I only knew bits and pieces. But Fletcher once mentioned a man named Carter, the one above Franklin. Said he ran things like a corporation. Files, counts, victims. They'd find the vulnerable, then create digital blueprints of their lives. Steal their signatures, log into their utilities, then make it look like the victims willingly handed everything over before dying peacefully." Curtis muttered under his breath. "Like cleaning up human lives. No trace. No noise," Vanessa added. "Just silence and paperwork." I stood and walked to the window. Silence and paperwork. That was going to be my ending. Not if I could help it. "We need to find Carter," I said. Vanessa hesitated. "That won't be easy. He doesn't use his real name. But Fletcher had a burner phone. He used to call Carter every Monday at 8 a.m. Do you have it?" She nodded slowly. "It's in my car. I didn't want it in the house." Minutes later, we had the phone charging on my kitchen table. Curtis got to work bypassing the lock screen. He was a whiz with tech, and within half an hour, he had the logs displayed. There it was. Carter. Monday 8:02 a.m. Duration. 4 minutes and 18 seconds. 3 voice messages. 1 text. We played the latest message on speaker. Carter's voice was sharp, emotionless. Gregory failed. Do not contact me again. We'll reroute through the secondary asset in Pennsylvania. Franklin is compromised. Clean it up. My heart dropped. They were moving on. Another target. Someone like me. Someone who didn't know they were already marked. Curtis sat back in his chair, stunned. Miss Martha. They're still active. This wasn't about revenge. This is a business. Vanessa leaned forward. They'll vanish once they know you're on to them. Unless we do something fast. What about the press? Yes. Gregory's arrest was public. Vanessa shook her head. This Carter, he doesn't leave trails. He pays people to disappear. He'll make Fletcher seem like a schoolboy. That's when I made a decision I never imagined I'd make. We go to the FBI. Curtis looked at me, surprised. I nodded slowly. This isn't just my fight anymore. The next day we met with Special Agent Dana Willoughby, a short, stern woman with a voice that could cut through steel. I handed her the USB, the burner phone, the photos, the audio clips, and most importantly, the story. She listened carefully, taking notes, interrupting only to clarify spellings or addresses. When I finished, she closed her notebook. This may be bigger than we thought, she said. We've had similar cases flagged over the last 2 years. Elderly homeowners vanishing. Estates transferred. Money gone. But no solid evidence. Until now. He paused. But Miss Green. Exposing this won't be safe. They've already threatened you once. I looked her dead in the eye. They made me dig my own grave. I'm not afraid to climb out of it. She nodded. We'll keep an agent on your property. You'll be under surveillance. But you need to keep up the act. Stay off the grid as much as possible. No calls to people you don't trust. No online banking. No sudden moves. What about Carter? Yes. We'll find him, she said. You just need to stay alive long enough to testify. The words hung in the air like smoke. Stay alive. Like it was a challenge. Like it was a dare. When we returned home that night, the house felt colder. I sat by the fire and stared at the photo of Gregory as a boy. Back when he used to hug me with both arms and whisper, "I love you, Mommy," with his missing front teeth. I still don't know when that little boy died. I still don't know what killed him. Greed. Loneliness. Entitlement. But the man who replaced him, this stranger who wore my son's skin, he had become a weapon in something far more dangerous. And now I was at the center of it. That night I heard a knock at the back door. Curtis was asleep. The agent parked out front didn't move. I crept to the door and looked through the curtain. There was no one there. Just a single envelope taped to the glass. With one line written in bold, block letters. You should have died on the tracks. I pressed my hand against the cold window, my breath fogging the glass. They weren't done with me. But I wasn't done either. Please like, comment, and subscribe if this chapter left you speechless. Next chapter is where everything unravels, and we force Carter and his empire into the daylight. The envelope still trembled in my hand. You should have died on the tracks. 8 words. 8 bullets to the chest. A message delivered not in fear, but fury. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Because I knew now this wasn't about just me. It was about the others. The elderly, the sick, the isolated, who had no Curtis to watch their back. No Vanessa to spill the secrets. No Sheriff Davies or Agent Willoughby to call. I opened the envelope slowly, expecting poison or a photo or some grisly threat. But inside was a second message. We let your son walk out of jail. You let him walk into a trap. Carter doesn't forgive betrayal. TikTok. F. Gregory. The words hit me like a slap. They were going to kill my son. Not through justice. Through execution. As much as I hated him. As much as I wanted to bury his betrayal under 1,000 locked doors. He was still my son. And I knew exactly what this meant. Fletcher had turned. Carter was cleaning house. The network was collapsing. and anyone who could talk was being silenced. I ran to Curtis's room, flung the door open. He sat up groggy, rubbing his eyes. "Miss Martha, they're going to kill Gregory," I said, breathless. "They know we turned him in. And now they're burning the trail." Curtis blinked. You still want to save him?" "No," I said. "But I have to. Because if they kill him, we lose the last thread to Carter." Curtis was already grabbing his keys and laptop. "We need to find out where they took him after bail." We drove to Sheriff Davies' office, barely stopping to knock. He was in his robe, sipping coffee at his desk. "They're going to kill my son," I said. "Tonight." He didn't hesitate. He picked up the phone, called in every favor he could. Within 30 minutes, we had the name of the halfway house Gregory had been transferred to after release. Langford House on the edge of town. We raced there, headlights off, Curtis's laptop on his knees pulling satellite surveillance on the property. Langford House was quiet. Too quiet. A single light burned in the office. Curtis stayed in the car, broadcasting to Agent Willoughby via secure channel. I went in alone. The desk clerk was slumped over, unconscious or worse. I didn't stop to check. I ran down the corridor, past the peeling walls and humming fluorescents, until I heard it. Voice. Gregory's voice. He was crying. "Please, I didn't say anything. I didn't give them Carter's name." Then another voice. Cold. British. Precise. "You failed your assignment. Carter doesn't tolerate errors. You were sloppy. You brought attention. This isn't personal, Mr. Green. It's policy." I burst into the room. Gregory sat on a chair, zip-tied to the arms, sweat pouring down his face. Standing over him was a man in a sleek black coat, surgical gloves on his hands, and a long needle filled with something clear. "Step away from my son," I said, voice like thunder. The man turned. No mask. He didn't need one. He smiled at me. "You're braver than most, Mrs. Green." I raised my phone. "Say that again." The camera didn't catch it. His smile dropped. But before he could move, Curtis and 2 federal agents stormed the room behind me. The man lunged, but he was fast. Too fast. He slipped out the back window. The agents followed. Curtis ran to Gregory and cut the ties. My son slumped forward, sobbing. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would go this far." I didn't hug him. I didn't speak. I just turned to Agent Willoughby, who had arrived seconds later. "We need to trace that man. He answers to Carter." She nodded. "We'll catch him." He slipped, but not far. Gregory was taken into custody again, this time protective. But the damage was done. Now Carter knew we were circling. Back at home, I sat at the table while Curtis pulled up the last signal from the burner phone. A ping from an IP address in Charleston, West Virginia. Not far. Then another clue. Receipt. Uploaded to the cloud by accident. From a hardware store. Wire cutters. Surveillance lenses. Unregistered SIM cards. Name on the receipt. Charles Carter. It was his real name. Curtis traced the phone's next ping to a house. A massive property tucked between mountains, purchased under a shell company. Cameras at every corner. Gated entrance. Agent Willoughby turned to me. "You're not going," she said firmly. "Let us handle this." But I shook my head. "No. This ends the way it began, with a mother fighting for her life." She sighed. "You won't even be allowed near the property." "Then give me a camera. I'll find a way." And I did. The next morning, with Curtis in a surveillance van and Willoughby's team 2 minutes behind, I dressed like a cleaning lady, approached the Carter estate gate, and pressed the intercom. "Scheduled for 11 o'clock. Window cleaning." The voice on the other end paused, then buzzed me in. I stepped inside the lion's den. And the moment I entered the foyer, I saw him. Charles Carter. 60-something. White suit. Drinking red wine at noon. He looked me up and down. "You're not who I expected." Smiled. "You never are, Mr. Carter." Then I reached into my cart, pulled out a hidden GoPro lens, and tossed it into the air like confetti. As it spun, his face twisted in confusion. And outside, Curtis screamed into his mic. "Go. We've got visual." Doors burst open. Agents stormed the compound. Carter ran, but there was nowhere left to run. He was arrested, shackled, and finally unmasked. I stood outside in the wind, watching as the real monster who tried to erase me was shoved into the back of a black van. Vanessa appeared beside me, tears in her eyes. "You did it, Martha." I shook my head. "No, we did it." But just as I started to turn away, Curtis held up his phone. "There's one last message on the burner," he said. It was time-stamped this morning. It read, "There are more of us. You just caught one branch. The roots are deeper than you think. We don't forgive. And we don't forget." My heart slowed. The storm was over, but a war was still coming. Please like, comment, and subscribe if this chapter gave you goosebumps. Next chapter is where I prepare not just to protect myself, but to help every senior who's ever been preyed on by wolves in suits. The wind bit harder that night. Curtis and I sat on the porch of my old wooden house, the one Gregory tried to steal, the one Carter's people tried to bury me over. We didn't speak much. The sky was a bruised purple, the porch light flickering slightly above us like it, too, had survived a storm. The burner phone lay on the table between us, its screen still glowing with that final message. "You just caught one branch. The roots are deeper than you think. We don't forgive. And we don't forget." I took a sip of lukewarm tea, letting it settle on my tongue, waiting for the fear to return. But it didn't. Because this wasn't fear anymore. This was clarity. "They're still out there," Curtis said softly. "Other branches. Other Carters. Other Gregorys." "I know," I replied. "And they're counting on the next woman to be too old, too tired, too scared to fight." But I wasn't any of those things anymore. Agent Willoughby called the next morning. Carter was in federal custody, isolated, but refusing to talk. Not a word. His lawyers were ghosts, and even under pressure he seemed calm. Like he knew the wheels would keep spinning even with him behind bars. Vanessa had been helping investigators dig through his paper trail. What she uncovered nearly made me weep. 29 names. All elderly. All deceased. All with perfectly clean exit stories. Natural causes, quiet funerals, properties willed to family members no one had ever met. But the money, the real estate, the pensions, all funneled through shell companies tied to Carter's network. Curtis printed the list and laid it out on my dining table. Faces, birthdays, obituaries. And for the first time I understood. This wasn't just a crime ring. It was a machine. A conveyor belt of silence and disappearance. But there, at the bottom of the list, an entry marked pending had been crossed out. Martha Green voided. I leaned over the paper and signed my name across it in red ink. "That's right," I whispered. "Void me all you want. I'm still here." Curtis looked up from his laptop. "The feds want to hold a press conference. They want you to speak. You're the first victim to survive and expose them publicly." "Not victim," I said. "Witness. Fighter. And if they'll listen, I'll become something more." Curtis smiled faintly. "What's that?" "A shield for others." And so I did. 3 days later, under the bright lights of the courthouse steps, I stood in front of cameras. Not as a frail old woman. Not as someone waiting to die. But as someone who had been targeted, and stood back up. The press leaned in as I told my story. From the text Gregory accidentally sent to the train station to the forged documents, the poison tonic, the trap, the network, the name Carter, and the others still lurking in the shadows. I didn't hold back. They thought no one would believe a woman in her 80s. That no one would listen to an old voice. That grief could be forged, that love could be mimicked, that greed would be excused. My voice cracked, but I kept going. "Well, I'm here to say I'm not the only one. I won't be the last. But we can be louder. We can be smarter. And we will shine a light on them so hot, even their shadows will burn. Beat of silence. Then applause. Vanessa hugged me afterward. You're changing things, Martha. I'm surviving things, I said. But I'll take both. And yet, even with the press, even with Carter in chains, something gnawed at me. Because just as I stepped into my house that night, there was a knock on the door. I opened it slowly, cautious. A young woman stood there. Couldn't have been more than 30. Eyes red from crying. Hands clutched to a file folder. Are you Mrs. Green? She asked. I am. She handed me the folder. My grandmother, she was on that list. I didn't know. I didn't see the signs. But she passed last year. Everything was gone. Bank empty. Her house signed over. They said she changed her will, but I never believed it. He paused, breathing hard. I saw you on TV. You said you'd help people. I took the folder. I did. And I will. Curtis helped her into the living room. Vanessa arrived minutes later. I called Agent Willoughby. And before dawn we had a new case open. That woman's grandmother wasn't the only one. 2 more people came forward the next day. Then 5. Then 10. We formed a group. The newspapers called it the Green Light Initiative. A coalition of survivors, whistleblowers, attorneys, digital analysts, and seniors who refused to be erased. We partnered with advocacy groups, banks, estate planners, even online security teams. We helped rewrite protections for power of attorney documents, for senior care transfers, and for digital estate controls. But even as our movement grew, Gregory sat in his cell, awaiting trial. Sometimes he wrote me letters. Most were filled with blame, bitterness, and rambling justifications. But one stuck with me. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I just thought I was supposed to win at life. And you had the keys. I didn't know how else to get them. I never wrote back. Because what Gregory didn't understand was that love was the key. Trust, not entitlement. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear the sound of that train. The wind on the platform. The moment I realized my son would let me die for $1. And then I remember how I didn't fall. How I turned. How I lived. Because the greatest revenge isn't just surviving. It's turning survival into a movement. Please like, comment, and subscribe if this story stirred something in you. Next chapter is the final chapter, where justice is served, old wounds are faced, and I make one decision that will echo long after I'm gone. Don't miss it. The courtroom was cold. Not physically but emotionally. The air inside held a certain stillness. The kind that only ever surrounds the final reckoning. Gregory sat on the defendant's side, clean-shaven in a borrowed suit. He wouldn't look at me. Not once. He stared at the table like it might dissolve beneath him. It had been 8 long months since his arrest. 8 months of subpoenas, investigations, heartbreak, and healing. 8 months of watching other families come forward, many of them with stories far darker than mine. And now we were here. Agent Willoughby sat behind me. Curtis next to her. Vanessa in the front row. All of them had walked through fire with me. All of them knew what this day meant. The judge entered. The trial began. Prosecutors laid everything out. The forged documents. The poison tonic. The surveillance footage from the train station. The audio from the fake deed signing. The connection to Carter, Fletcher, and the criminal network that had been secretly bleeding the elderly dry for years. Gregory's attorney tried to spin it, said Gregory was manipulated, that he was desperate, that he never meant to go through with any plan. But the evidence stood tall. Like a wall Gregory could no longer climb. When they asked me to take the stand, I didn't hesitate. I rose slowly, walked with grace, and sat down. They asked me what happened, and I told them everything. From the day I found the text to the train station to the letters I never replied to. I looked right at Gregory. I raised you with both hands, I said. I fed you when I went hungry. I paid for your school with money your father and I stacked penny by penny. I gave you everything I had. Except for one thing. The courtroom was silent. I didn't give you the right to take my life. A murmur rippled through the rows. Gregory didn't move. The judge dismissed me gently, and I walked back to my seat, lighter than I had felt in years. After 2 days of testimony and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman stood. We, the jury, find the defendant Gregory Harold Green guilty on all counts. Closed my eyes. Not out of satisfaction but sorrow. Gregory was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison without parole. It was over. But I didn't clap. I didn't cry. I just sat quietly breathing. When the judge adjourned the court, Gregory stood briefly and looked at me. Only this time, it wasn't hatred in his eyes. It was something else. Regret. Grief. Loss. He mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." And then they led him away. Vanessa wrapped her arm around me. "He didn't deserve your forgiveness." "I didn't give it to him," I replied. "But I gave him the truth. What he does with it now is between him and God." In the weeks that followed, I found myself in the eye of a quiet storm. The media wanted interviews. The Green Light Initiative tripled in size. Our hotline rang off the hook. We connected with attorneys general from 3 states. Helped pass the Elder Asset Protection Act, which now requires 2 independent verifications for any legal transfer from a person over 70 years of age. But even in the victories, I felt something unresolved. I sat one morning on my porch, watching the sunrise, a letter in my hand. It was from a woman in West Virginia. Her father had been taken the same way Carter tried to take me. His home was gone. His name erased from deeds. He died thinking it was all his fault. "I wish he had lived long enough to fight back," she wrote. "But at least you did. For all of us." That letter broke something in me. And it also built something new. I walked inside and opened the drawer where Harold's old journal sat. I hadn't touched it in years. But I opened it to the back page and started writing. Not a diary. Not a note. Mission. I would use what time I had left to teach others how to protect what's theirs. From that day on, I began speaking at churches, community centers, nursing homes. I taught seniors how to recognize digital scams. I helped them file protective estate plans. I even created a free downloadable guide. Don't let them take what you built, and Curtis helped me get it online. Spread like wildfire. One day, I got an email from a woman in California. "Your story saved my mother's house. Thank you." Another from Canada. "They tried to get my grandfather to sign over his farm. Your guide helped us stop it in time." That's when I knew. This was my final chapter. Not the courtroom. Not Gregory. Not even Carter. But this. Empowerment. Restoration. Redemption. At 83, I wasn't done. On my birthday, Curtis and Vanessa threw me a surprise party at the town hall. There were speeches, balloons, cake shaped like a house, and a plaque presented by the mayor himself. To Martha Green, for pushing greed into the light and turning survival into a legacy. They all clapped, but I just smiled quietly. Because none of them knew what I had done earlier that morning. I had rewritten my will. Removed Gregory's name. Added a foundation in its place. The Green Light Trust. Its sole purpose. To defend, protect, and honor the dignity of the elderly. Long after I'm gone. As the sun dipped low and the crowd faded, I sat on the town hall steps, watching the light fall across the sidewalk. Curtis sat beside me. Vanessa stood behind us, her arms folded, her eyes soft. "You good, Miss Martha?" Curtis asked. Smiled. "I'm better than good," I said. "I'm free." He nodded. "You think they'll come back?" "Oh, they always do," I said. "But this time, they won't find a lonely old woman." I stood slowly, stretching my back. "They'll find a wall. Made of voices. Of people who watched what happened to me and said, 'Never again.'" Curtis grinned. "You think we should trademark that?" I laughed. "We already have. Check the website." As we walked down the sidewalk, the street lamps clicked on one by one. And for the first time in years, I wasn't walking into darkness. I was walking into light. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that strength has no age limit, and showed you how quiet courage can change everything. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your story matters too. Let's make sure the world hears it.